Hello and welcome to this last and final session that is titled How Localized is the Triple Nexus? And my name is Darina Pellowska. I'm a research fellow at the Center for Humanitarian Action. And today I'm joined by Chad Anderson, who is the head of child poverty reduction for Save the Children in Somalia. And with him, I'm going to shed some light on the Somalia context. In his role, Chad guides the strategic direction of the poverty reduction portfolio of Save the Children in Somalia, which includes projects on food security, livelihoods, social protection, and youth skills development. But today, he's not going to share his technical expertise, but more his interesting experiences on the potentials, but also the challenges on interlinking the very dedicated localization approach of Save the Children in the Triple Nexus programming of Somalia. So welcome, Chad. I'm very happy that we have you here today.
Hi, Darina. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Darina, for that very pleasant intro. Excellent. So I know there's quite a lot to discuss on this topic, so perhaps I won't delay before diving in. I would like to dive in just on three areas. One, let me briefly explain how working on the Nexus is not possible without engaging local partners, in our opinion. Two, why it is so important that that engaging local partners contributes to peace through state building specifically. And then three, really briefly, on how nationalization of our own organization can also contribute to localization. So let me just dive right in on the first point. So in our view, working on the Nexus would not be possible without engaging local partners. I think we can take cash programming as a good example of this. Right now in Somalia, cash is really the bread and butter of our humanitarian response and that of many organizations working in Somalia. But it won't be, and it shouldn't be forever, not for always, not for long. For now, it does remain essential. There are no government systems in place to respond to cyclical climate shocks that the population faces in Somalia. But we need to really make sure that we use our humanitarian responses as an entry point to be able to support the government and also civil society to respond to the needs of citizens better. So that's why Save the Children now is already channeling about 15% of our funds that we receive through local partnerships. That's 10% below the grand bargain request of 25%, but it's a step in the right direction. And that allows us to really engage local authorities and also local government, local civil society and also local government, I should say, in designing ways to relook at humanitarian cash through really looking at social protection and building shock responsive social protection systems. So I think it's really important to highlight also that BMZ has made some really strategic investments in this area on behalf of the German government, which have put us in a position to really provide capacity strengthening on social protection directly to government officials, to lay that framework to eventually replace cash programming, humanitarian cash programming to some extent, step by step, as I said. We've also been able to provide the government with the tools that they need to get started on building longer term assistance. And thirdly, on that area, we've been able to provide support on drafting Somalia's first national social protection policy, which has now been complemented by an implementation framework. So this is really laying the foundational building blocks for what should hopefully in the future replace cyclical humanitarian response. On the next point, I'll just be a bit more brief. And this is where peace enters the equation. When we operate in fragile contexts like Somalia, it's important that every step is calculated. We do everything we can to ensure our humanitarian interventions contribute to building the social contract. That's the relationship between the citizen and the state. And that's what's lacking in Somalia right now. And that's why we're in a situation where we have peace is a very important part of our work. It's important that we do not take any steps to erode that social contract. This means that we, in our programs, we do not set up any parallel structures when responding to basic needs. That's why we support government-owned health clinics and schools, and we also build the capacity of relevant government authorities to provide these basic services directly to their citizens and use their systems, their structures, while helping to build them at the same time. I already touched a bit on the social protection side, but that's essentially why we're also working at that same level. There's no government system to use now for cash, but hopefully in the future we'll have one. And we're taking the steps that we can, at least, to move in that direction. So I think it's really important to maybe just emphasize that health, education, and social protection, they really form the foundation of the social contract, of that relationship between me and my government and Somalis and their government. And so it's really important that we do what we can to make sure that we do not erode it, but we contribute to it, even through humanitarian aid. And so on the third point, it's important that, of course, we walk our talk. So, and we practice localization within our own team. So while I'm a Canadian, I'm talking with you today, this is more by chance and according to availability, unfortunately, rather than capacity. My capacity to talk on this is certainly much less than many of my colleagues. I'm really pleased to be able to share that an overwhelming majority of our team in Somalia is Somali. Our country director is Somali. Most of our senior management team is Somali. My team of senior technical specialists are all Somali. The team has been completely nationalized as of September. In fact, more than 95% of our 550 staff, quite a big team, across Somalia are Somali. So I'm one of a few, which is a good thing, obviously. So this is something that we're proud of. It means we have our ear to the ground. It means most of us have grown up in the context we're working in. We can understand the more than 70 districts that we work in very well. It helps us to plan and respond better and build relationships that also allow us to be agile when we need to be. So perhaps this is an example of localization that is showing us that even in contexts like Somalia, you know, something that's maybe a bit controversial, but humanitarians like myself who move around the world, and like perhaps many of us on this call, you know, if we're doing if we're walking the talk, will we become redundant? And I suppose that's my question to wrap up with, is in a way, working to make ourselves redundant, purposely working to make ourselves redundant, a key marker of success for organizations like us who are committed to the Nexus. So I'll throw it back at you, Darina, on that note.
Have already been very important points that you raised, and I would just jump into one point that you raised in the beginning of your input, where you highlighted how you're working together with the government and how you strive your projects to be governmentally led and owned, also in order to foster and to support this social contract, like you explained. So working with and through the government is, of course, not always easy, because they might have their own interests, which might not always correspond with the humanitarian imperative, the SDGs, or even public needs at all. So hence, a locally owned and governmentally led approach also comes with increased risks with regards to accountability towards local populations, but also accountability towards donors and transparency. While at the same time, donors and the international community is also becoming increasingly risk averse. At least that's what I hear from the ground. So may I ask you, in your daily work, how do you deal with that dilemma of increased risks through a localized approach, and at the same time, donors and the international community becoming more and more risk averse?
Thank you, Darina. That's a really great question. I think certainly there's a point behind this. I think there's a lot of experience behind what you're saying. The context throughout the continent is very diverse. I know that colleagues working in other countries in the region face the issues that you were just discussing. They're perhaps also a bit further along in the Nexus than we are in Somalia with a relatively new government. But I know that I'm not going to call out any specific country, but I know that there's countries that have, it's been quite difficult, a difficult process. One place where we're very lucky in Somalia is that we are in the early steps. We are able to work with a new government that has been, at least from my interactions with the government, they've really been keen to learn, to grow, and to do so really to be able, with the end goal of providing basic services to their citizens, to Somalis. And many of the government representatives have also returned. The returnees from all over the world, Somalis who've moved to Europe, to Canada, to the US and other countries, and they're coming back with the intention to really serve the country. And so far, the process has been, and the experience has been very, very uplifting. I do understand that that's a relatively bright context. It's not that bright everywhere. And so like you're saying, and I'll just reiterate, we have IHL, we have IHRL, we have humanitarian legal frameworks that call on us to respond. We have a duty to respond where governments, where politics might get in the way, where populations are left behind, and often those are the most vulnerable populations. So in specific geographical areas of a country or a specific ethnic group, or as such, I mean, a vulnerable group, if they are left behind by the government, in which, a top-down approach has severely failed, we have the humanitarian obligation to go in and serve and reach that community. And I think even where it's not even that severe, where there's not a situation where a population is being neglected purposely, as we move forward in Somalia, systems are just being built. There will always be situations, not always, but there will be situations as we move forward where we have to fill the gap of a specific, a gap in the healthcare system, a gap in the social protection system, or a gap in the education system. So indeed, it is our duty to continue to fill those gaps. It's our duty to work on these contexts as closely as possible, continue to gather intelligence and information to be able to foresee any grave human rights abuses or neglect before it happens as well. I think that's also a key part of our duty, to be able to plug in where we need to plug in as urgently as possible.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to hear that you have such good experiences, and I'm crossing fingers that this is going to continue like that. Let me jump on another point that you just raised, namely your great success in what you call nationalisation of your staff. My sincere congratulations to your success like that. 95% of your colleagues are from Somalia. It's great, and it's a big success. And I know that many other organizations are also striving to achieve the same goal. So I wonder if you could share some of your experiences and give us a little hint on your secret to this success.
That's really kind of you to say. I have to pass the message of congratulations on to my colleagues who have been the ones laying the foundation blocks for nationalization for many, many years. The senior management team has been focusing on this as a top priority. But I can tell you that there's a lot of planning behind it. We purposely do succession planning, where anyone in the extended senior management team or in technical specialist positions, for example, we are planning who will take those roles next, and they should be from within the country team, where the capacity exists. And we find that it usually does. So for example, the succession planning that I had within my team resulted in full nationalization in September. And each member of my team who I've hired since I have joined has all been national. And so we get people Somalis going from program manager level into technical specialist positions, going from beyond that into more senior level management positions. But it's done specifically with a plan for that to happen. It doesn't happen by coincidence. Unfortunately, I just don't think those things happen by coincidence. But with succession planning and an investment in training and capacity building and annual capacity building plans and learning plans and the rest of it that goes into it, we've been able to achieve, I think, something that makes our country office a really great place to work for Somalis. And I know that it's quite popular in Somalia as an employer because of that as well. It's known beyond our walls, if you will, definitely.
Thank you, Chad. It's very enlightening. However, it's not one of your 95% Somali colleagues joining us today, but it's you who's clearly a foreigner to the Somali context, talking to me about localization. So I wonder if it is really just availability issues, or is there more behind that? What can be the reason why you were asked by your colleagues to join me today? Or to put it differently, what can we as northern NGOs, northern think tanks do to encourage our Somali colleagues to also participate in fora like this, and to also lose the fear of raising their voices?
That's a really good point. I love this interaction, how direct you're being. Thank you, Darina, because I deserve that. I mean, here I am talking about nationalization. I'm the one you're seeing, and it's unfortunate. It is a coincidence. It's unfortunate. Our national partnerships manager, who would actually be the best person to talk about this, he recently moved into another position. He got a promotion, and he's also working his way up to the organization. So he's no longer in a position to talk about this and currently traveling. He's on a plane or in transit somewhere right now. So it wouldn't have worked. We had gone through a couple other options as well. I happen to be the only foreign option, and by some coincidence I'm here with you. So but it's well noted, and I'm going to give this feedback back to my colleagues as well. The next time I should not be the one, because you know what? I can tell you that. My Somali colleagues are not afraid of speaking in this type of forum and environment. They quite like it, and I think they have much more to offer on this than I do. So it's a great point for the future, and I'll be taking it back to all my colleagues.
Sorry for being directly as that. My last question before I want to hand over to my colleague Charlotte for some inputs from the chat is on capacity building. You mentioned capacity building inside your organizations, but you also mentioned it in our preparatory discussions with regards to your partner organizations. But in my experience, more often than not, capacity building is understood as in terms of teaching partners on how to navigate and maneuver the different administrative and institutional realities, but also the different ideological backgrounds in the different silos that we face in the Triple Nexus sectors as well. However, in the context of Somalia and in the Triple Nexus literature overall, local organizations and local staff has been especially praised for their effective Triple Nexus thinking. And so my question would be, how can INGOs like Save the Children not only build the capacity of their partners, but also benefit from the input and approaches and fresh insights of their local partners, but also of their local staff, and make this an eye-to-eye level exchange? Can you share some views on that, please?
That's a really good point. Eye-to-eye level exchange. We have been quite serious about that, and it's a lot of work. I think one area that we start off immediately is, well, first of all, we usually take a long-term approach to partnerships. And these relationships always have check-ins, like any relationship should, with good communication. So we check in, we listen to our partners, but through a facilitated and formal process, let's say, as well as your day-to-day work. So we do make an effort to we don't want to overburden our partners. Have told us that everyone working with them wants to do assessments. We don't want to overburden with assessments, but we want to have dialogue and listen. So we listen to our partners. They tell us what they need. They request from us what they need to achieve their own strategies and plans for their future. For every organization, just like ours, they have their own 2020 plan, 2030 plan. But what do you need from us? And that's what we are really interested to hear from them. And together we can think about ways and with funding available. As I said, this year we're channeling about $15 million through local partners to be able to engage them in work that builds their own structures. But also through that process, we learn from them. You know, we learn from them, but we also okay. So let's say, for example, we work with youth organizations. There are no really active. There are unions in Somalia, but there's no specifically very active union representing youth. But the closest thing we have is youth organizations. These organizations are way better than we are at mobilizing youth, at representing youth, at having youth members that they constantly engage with, and then bringing their voice out and mobilizing them around specific opportunities that are there for their future. And so we've learned a lot from them in that process, but we're also not interested in replacing that. So we don't need to learn from them to be able to do it. We need to just support them to be able to do it, because they're already doing it better than we can do it. And they should be doing it in the future. So yeah, we can see a lot of their strengths, and we are really interested in continuing to support that as we move forward in our relationships with them.
Thank you for sharing your interesting experience. I think we could continue this discussion forever. However, I'd like to give the floor to the online audience and see which interesting questions and points have come up there. So for this, Charlotte has joined me. Charlotte, what's going on in the chat?
Hey, Darina, and thank you, chat, for this super interesting input. The chat has been quite lively, so I'm trying to catch up with it. I would say, firstly, there's two questions that I would like to share from the chat. The first comes from Katharina Wöhle, who asks, the Triple Nexus calls for a strong cooperation and collaboration, which makes coordination more important. In the recent States of Fragility report, the OECD reports that Somalia provides a model for how a country platform can help to enhance cooperation. So the question would be what your impression on this is, Chad. And the second question sort of takes us back to the previous remark of double-hattedness, which has been posed before, re-emphasizing the tricky relation between funding and collaboration. There's a strong participation in collective assessment and formulations of plans, such as within the current COVID context, but it's not all reflected in equal allocation of and access to funding. So the question would be, what are your insights here on?
Thank you, Charlotte. Chad, may I pass the ball straight on to you?
Certainly. Thank you, Charlotte. It's good to hear from those who are listening in. First, on coordination, yeah, I do think that Somalia does provide a good example of coordination working relatively well. And Save the Children has no, you know, we're not responsible for that. That excellent achievement goes on to many others, including partners in the UN system. But we are actively engaged in it. These coordination mechanisms are looking at a variety of different technical areas. Oh, why am I forgetting the name of that document? The collective outcomes document for the Nexus was obviously done through a coordinated approach, mostly together with the government and the UN organizations. So while there's been, I think, a very strong coordinated approach on the technical level, on looking at how we can use technical approaches to bridge the Nexus, which I think has been quite strong. On the actual, let's say, like collective outcomes and the actual indicators that we set for ourselves to achieve the Nexus, that's been more of a, in some ways, a closed-door discussion between the UN and government. But certainly the information has been widely disseminated to us, and we've been pleased to receive it nonetheless. But indeed, coordination, I think, has been going better than it's been going worse. It's definitely a good example. And Save the Children is very thankful to a variety of humanitarian partners for carrying that hat so well. So I think, speaking of hats, you mentioned double-hattedness. funding and collaboration. I hope I understood the point correctly, but yeah, when funding enters the picture, the stakes can become high, and of course, there's many partners that are always interested in engaging and working alongside those implementing and winning, let's say, large development and humanitarian projects. But that's, I think, where long-term relationships come into play. There also is obviously like open tender processes. There are, I mean, specifically when there's more of a contract tender happening, which might not always classify as your traditional approach to partnership. But indeed, there are really strong players in any technical area, like on youth, for instance. There's 2 organizations that I'm thinking of in one part of Somalia that are really, really, really strong, and we tend to have long-term partnerships with them. But I do think that the long-term partnerships, in a way, just to reflect, have been a good way for us to in some way manage these like high interest levels when funding comes up. When we engage in longer term partnership frameworks, so of course we have a strong administrative system that backs up our partnerships with partnership frameworks. When we have long-term partnership frameworks and we've committed to building the capacity of specific partners over time, some of that in a way ends up by de facto becoming a bit removed from the equation in a way that could be healthy for our relationship with our partners, but also sustainability in the approach in terms of really engaging specific partners over a longer period rather than kind of shifting with every project and ad hoc in a way that doesn't necessarily contribute to their own planning process as well internally. So back over to you, Darina.
Thank you. Indeed, very enlightening. And we've look at the time. We are running out of time all too fast, unfortunately. I hope I can pass one more bunch of questions to you, Chad, but I would ask you to link that maybe with your final words, with some final words to say, because we are all trying to keep the time here. So Charlotte.
Thank you. So there is one more question from the chat stemming from Sigrid Kuke. And the question is as follows: is localization in terms of working mostly through local partners the way to go in Somalia, given that most areas outside the garrison towns are not accessible? So many reports point out it's not possible to control corruption. So the question would be how to ensure checks and balances in such contexts.
This is quite a challenging one. I hope this is good for you.
I was about to launch into a long answer.
Please try to take just a couple of minutes. All right, over to you.
That's a really good question, might I say, from an intelligent mind. Sigrid, it's nice to receive Sigrid works on Somalia, of course, as well. Thank you for your question. This is something I think we should also discuss bilaterally too. I'll try and tie it into my closing remarks. Yeah, there are always risks. There are always areas that we may have difficulty in accessing. Generally, Save the Children has a relatively, in consideration of the NGOs working in Somalia, we have quite a good reach, and we're able to access many areas that many others aren't. But like you say, there's areas in southern states where no one can get in, partners alike. So partnerships, I don't think partnerships should be used ever, but they shouldn't necessarily be used to solve accessibility issues. But certainly where none of us can gain access, we do have a big issue there. And that's where we need to kind of lay the foundational building blocks for the social contract to be built in those corridors, step by step as we can move closer. So I think you and I should pick up that very good discussion on the sidelines. And let me just say, I know that we're running out of time, so let me just say really quickly, I'd like to thank the Center for Humanitarian Action for creating the space and opportunity to really share these experiences today with that diverse group. I think I can maybe conclude by saying that, you know, localization can only be what we make of it, what both parties make of it. For us as international actors and for our local actors as local partners and national actors, we've been, like I said, really fortunate to work with outstanding partners in Somalia. They've truly inspired me personally. Specific people even in them have just really, truly inspired me. And we've been investing in building, like I said, these long-term relationships. So it's really important to us, I think at this time, to really, feel that privilege of being able to work with such amazing partners and feel thankful for it. So I'd like to just say, on behalf of me and my colleagues, a really sincere message of thanks to all of our partners across Somalia for working very tirelessly to meet the needs of Somali youth, Somali children, and their families, working day in, day out in very difficult and challenging operating contexts. The work you're doing is so very much appreciated.
Indeed, very inspiring words. Thank you, Chad. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and as I said earlier, we could continue to talk about this forever. So also thank you for the online audience for these interesting questions. And let me tell you, for all of you who are still not tired about talking about localization, Chad is currently drafting on a project on localization. So if you want to put hats together, just send us an email and join us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Having said that, Andrea, I want to give the floor to you for the concluding words and closing of the conference.
Thank you, Darina. Thank you very much. As you have mentioned, it is now the time to close this conference. It is my pleasure to do so. I will not get involved in the attempt to recap everything that has been said. I think something that I can certainly not do justice to. What I want to say, though, is so when someone is busy organizing a conference like this, sometimes we tend to lose sight of the content and the context and the actual topic. And while I have seen and read a lot of stuff and papers about the Triple Nexus in the past, I have to say that what I've heard and that what we have heard today and yesterday confirmed some of our research, but I personally have also listened to other aspects that challenged my preconceived notions. So I think we have all learned a lot. I have certainly learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. To everyone who has been involved, the speakers, panelists, and the online audience, those who maybe have been with us, the Center for Humanitarian Action, since the beginning, and those who have just learned about us today or yesterday, please do not hesitate to get in contact, like my colleague Sonia has already said, with ideas, questions, and comments. We are very much open to that. It's part of our mission. We see it as part of our mission, creating links between spheres and organizations and also silos. Now it's time to actually say thank you to everyone we have bothered with questions on the Triple Nexus during the course of the past 18 months, to all the speakers and panelists, and I actually do want to take the time to name them all again, because I'm quite surprised myself. It's 26 people. We started with Marina Caparini, Reife Janke, Vale Oshofisan, Carsten Noko, Kayu Orellana, Marta Tukahirva, Philippa Schmitzkino, Rebecca Richards, Martina Zapf, Marc Dubois, Florian Westphal, Mena Abraha, Rüdiger Schöch, Julia Steetz, Bärbel Kofler, Martin Schuldes, Cecilia Rosselli, Diawari Bouare, Michael Köhler, Oliver Müller, Susanne Luitlen, Markus Koth, Annika Sandlund, Christian Huber, Jennifer Ankrom-Chan, and last but not least, Chad Anderson. Thank you so much. Your contribution has been so valuable and made us think even more in a more creative ways about the Triple Nexus. We want to thank the audience for interesting questions and a very, very lively debate. I'm actually looking forward to studying the chat, which I haven't had the full capacity during the past 2 days, but I will do so later this week, and I think we all will enjoy the input given there a little bit more later. The recordings of this event are already available on our website, charberlin.org. And now I want to take the time to also get the attention to the backstage side of things. First of all, we want to give credit to the whole team of Live Records. This is why I'm looking in this direction right now, for operating the live stream and for making us and the event look very shiny and nice, and we felt very safe and comfortable in your hands. Thank you so much. We have been also getting support for layout, graphics, and proofreading from Carla Cimino, Ben Dumas, Catherine Cassibri, Karima Laborenz. And now, the most important part, maybe also in the name of Sonja and Ralf, I would like to extend our deepest, really deepest gratitude to our CHAR colleagues that have carried out the planning, preparation, and execution of this event on their shoulders. None of what you have seen or heard this past 2 days would have been possible without their tireless efforts. So, Lena Wallach, Darina Pellowska, my colleague standing next to me, Goda Milashute, Arvid Ratzai, Charlotte Falchers, and Bishoy Sadek, thank you so much. We appreciate everything so much. Another time, I would say, last but not least, we want to thank our institutional partners for, first of all, coming up with the idea of founding this independent research institution, teaming up to actually make it happen, coordinating to do so, and supporting us all along the way, up until the realization of this conference, and also longer. Caritas Germany, Diakonie Katastrophenhilfe, and the German section of Médecins Sans Frontières. Speaking of which, please now open the window, let some fresh air inside your home offices, kitchens, and living rooms. Get a very strong coffee and maybe also or a vitalizer of your choice otherwise, and join the Humanitarian Congress for the rest of the week, which is going on until Friday. They have amazing speakers and very critical issues to discuss, exposing power and privilege within the humanitarian sector. What is left to say from my side? Please stay healthy, support your communities, which is a key aspect in any situation, may that be COVID-19 pandemic in Germany or questions related to Triple Nexus activities and planning, and maybe next time we can meet under improved or at least different circumstances. So long, bye-bye, and thank you.